Finds, written by Speedhump23. The lone planet hung in space approximately 0.8 Krell from the puny yellow star. The Asteria's battlecruiser had been sent by the leaders, as this ship would be more than enough to subdue such a fragmented planet. According to the galactic records, first contact had been less than a half a local rotation ago. No race in history had taken less than about 10 rotations to respond properly to the wider galaxy knocking on their door. Powering up the main drivers, the captain of the Asteria's battlecruiser finished polishing the bejeweled nose guard and pressed the button to interrupt all communications on the planet below. He would deliver the ultimatum of surrender and servitude, or destruction and ding. Unknown vessel, you are currently parked in a no parking zone. You've been fined 1,000 galactic credits and will be further fined per 5 local minutes you stay illegally parked. Captain Wins looked at the bridge speaker system. How did they do that to our comms? Before his panicked communication officer could answer, another message came through. Bing! Unknown vessel, you have powered area effect weapons inside a no-fire zone. You've been fined 22,000 galactic credits for this offense. Failure to power down your weapons immediately will result in further fine being levied against your descendants or suitable planetary representatives. Your vessel is also being targeted by space and land-based defense systems. Captain Woons turned to his weapons officer and snarled, Target any weapons targeting us. Prepare to destroy them. Turning back to his communications officer, Woons signaled for him to open the communications channel again. This is Captain Woons. The channel shut down following a brief display of electrical components ascending to a higher level of existence. The communications officer jumped back from his burning console and tried to smother the flames with his ceremonial feather headrest. All bridge crew were required to be in dress uniform when making announcements to planets they were conquering. It improved the image. Captain, the sending circuits have melted. We cannot communicate. Just as Captain Wens was about to respond, the untouched received circuits fizzled to life, and a calm voice was heard from the bridge. Unknown vessel, you have been fined an additional 2,000 galactic credits for failure to move to a designated parking orbit, as well as an additional 50,000 for continuing to power area effect weapons in a no-fire zone. Furthermore, your attempt to mass broadcast to the planet communication systems has resulted in fines of contravening 13 planetary, federal, and galactic council laws on the use of communications devices. Needless to say, the combined fines now exceed the value of your vessel, and it has been confiscated to act as a surety for payment. The navigator jumped up from his console. Captain, someone has hacked our system and is remote piloting us towards the moon. Captain Woons looked on in panic as his weapon system suddenly powered down. All the hatches on the ship closed and then started opening in sequence. He was unsure what was going on until he realized the areas were being linked together and the crew were being forced to move to a new area by warning alarms announcing imminent atmospheric loss to space. Compartment by compartment, all his crew were being herded towards the hangar bay. Only the bridge seemed safe. Checking to make sure, Wins was shocked to discover the corridor outside the bridge was now in hard vacuum. There had been no warning, sirens, or anything. After about an hour, the Asteria's battlecruiser made lunar orbit. Arrayed in front of them were a half-dozen warships from local raiders to mid-range armed forces. Moving from captured ships to the ground base in a rather large crater on the moon were military transport shuttles based on the standard galactic pattern. As the ship came to a stop, several transport shuttles docked with the hangar bay, which then slowly started to decompress, encouraging the terrified crew towards the shuttle and air. Captain Wins slumped at his shoulders in defeat and marshaled his crew towards the bridge airlock, where a shuttle had just docked. The slight hiss of escaping air made it obvious that the atmosphere on the bridge was being vented. The stunned communications officer went to put his still smoking feathered headdress back on, but the captain motioned for the crew to take them off. We are not going to intimidate these Terrans with feathered headdresses, not after they captured our ship so easily. Sitting in an office on Earth, the two members of the Terran cyber defense team marked another silhouette on the wall chart. Standing behind them was a visiting representative from the Galactic Federation. He'd been doing a tour of the space control offices when the attack had started. Parzit was an expert in assisting newly discovered systems to integrate into Gulfed. Sadly, he'd seen too many fall to pirates such as the Hysteria's group. Terra/Earth seemed to be different though. Very different. How did you take control of that pirate ship so quickly? Parsad had been shocked at the lack of panic on display, and then shocked even more when they understood what Cyber Team was doing. I do not understand how you even managed to think of such a desperate response. William Mays smiled as he turned to Representative Parsad. It started when your Gulfhead pilot made contact with us about 6 months ago. When he rescued that deep space racer with the damaged ship, Parsad remembered the incident. It had been a great way for the humans to discover they were not alone, and a surprise to the Gulfhead, who thought nothing could be alive and sentient on a Class 4 Deathworld. Local space controllers contacted his ship to assign it an IFF and also check that it was not likely to cause any problems, dangerous animals, etc. When the technician made contact with the ship, the antivirus software on his computer detected an unprotected system and wanted to do a virus scan. Parsad checked the readouts on his wrist. Yes, my ship triggered a similar issue when it contacted the local air tower for permission to land. It seems that the Space Command computers are very persistent in checking vessels, and it went through what we thought was adequate protections in seconds. Yes, said William. The traffic control computers are designed to help land ships, especially in an emergency. They have the habit of being ready to do so at a moment's notice. William smiled again at that. Yes. And when we realized how unprotected Gulfhead ship computer systems are, our section was set up to see what we needed to do in cases of such as these. The idea for the fines was because our budget was not properly allocated, and we need the money for more comfy chairs. Mind you, with the Hasteria's ship being docked at the alien transit station on the moon, the ship would soon be officially claimed as forfeit due to the fines and then off to the shipyards for evaluation. Then either the modification for humans or disassembly for parts. Parsad smiled again. And you have how many of these ships so far? David Blue and William looked at the tally board on the wall. 8 ships so far this month, 6 of them in lunar orbit, and another 2 at the docks for evaluation, along with the 15 ships in the previous few months. We have 23 different ships so far. Parsad started to smile. A human trait he was learning. Then his face froze. Hold up. 23 different ships, not ones from the same races. Do you mean to say that you can take over any ship in range? William actually grinned at that, actually putting down his coffee mug to do so. Watch this. Seeing the image of his ship flash up on the main monitor, Parsad was not expecting anything to happen. His ship was protected by the best computer systems in the Gulfhead lair. Just then, the ship's forward thruster started to vent small puffs of gas. The microphones nearby heard the unmistakable sounds of a recent popular song. Somehow, they'd reprogrammed his ship's variable aperture thrusters to emit possible sound effects. Parsad watched as the song finished with a flourish of gases. Please tell me that this is the only access you have, that it is a diplomatic ship. And the crew must be worried something is going wrong. William looked at another monitor. It showed the entire crew in the galley had been too busy watching a collection of videos showing various baby Earth animals rolling off couches, etc. They had missed the entire show. We also gave your crew full access to our local pay TV and ISP channels, so they would not be bored. At this point, Parsad was convinced that these humans would be an interesting race to help guide as they joined the Galactic Federation. He just hoped that the Gulfhead could survive the experience. End of story. Story number 2. Red, written by WegianWarrior. Gwen neatly sidestepped a large male waiting in line as she was drawn to the rows of freshly made products. Just like the scent and warmth had drawn her in from the rain earlier, after having managed to avoid the Terran boutique since it opened. Josh's Bakery, the sign in interlingua over the door said. No one on Throm 4 had had an idea of what a bakery was. But once one was opened, it had been quite the hit amongst the most buoyant members of society. Or, as the towering Terran had said in the Trid video interview, the upper crust. No one on Throm 4 had known what a crust was either. For a society raised on gruel, for a civilization fed by porridge, the idea of adding fungus to the grain and exposing it to heat was an alien as a Terran. Gwen forced herself not to press her snout against the fresh, brown, warm, and above all, aromatic loaves that the tall Terrans behind the counter were quickly and efficiently taking out the ovens and stacking high. And just as quickly they were snatched up by richly dressed locals. And And this was why Gred had avoided the bakery, with all of its tempting scents paid for. Gred inhaled deeply, telling herself that she ought to leave. She could not afford even the smallest Terran love. She could not, she chided herself, even afford the scent of one. Someone jostled her, pushing her aside without so much as looking at her as they reached for a loaf. On Throm, no one saw you if you were one of the unfortunates. The big oven door swung open again, releasing a cloud of steam and scent. Gred's muzzle and ears twitched. No one saw you if you were poor. She looked around the shop, full of patrons who were waiting in line, reaching for loaves, then waiting in line again to pay. No one looked at her. Gred realized no one ever saw her. She looked around again, tail quivering. Then, suddenly quite determined, she wrapped her warm cloak around herself and walked out with a determined step, one paw held under her cloak. She hadn't made it far at all before she felt the presence behind her. She tried to walk faster, but before long it was more than a presence. She could feel the heavy steps through the bare soles of her paws. Not glancing behind herself, she darted into a handy alleyway, only to realize too late that it was a dead end. Gred turned around resigned and looked up, and then further up, at the towering Terran standing at the entrance to the alley. "I'm sorry," she quivered. "I just... The giant held out a big hand, holding a well-filled bag as Gred's voice trailed off. "You forgot your bag, miss." Gred blinked, then blinked again. I don't think..." The bag was thrust out further, closer to Gred's nose. "I'm sure it's your bag, miss. I watched you in the bakery. I saw you slip a roll under your cloak." Gred took a tentative step closer, one shaking paw reaching for the bag. The Terran's big mouth curved upwards. "But," she said as he hesitated, "why?" "We have a saying on Earth," the towering Terran said, as big but gentle fingers wrapped Gred's paw around the bag's handle, which goes something like, "If you see someone stealing food." Gred twitched at the S word, but held onto the bag of steaming hot loaves as it was life. "Yes?" "No, you didn't," the human concluded, as he pulled his hand back. "But..." "I have to get back to work, miss," the human said gently as he turned. "But if you come to the back door after sunset, you'll find the other queue. The queue of the ones who don't have to pay for a meal." End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.